You've asked about being recorded.
Oh, I haven't gotten to that part yet. Okay, all right. Did you want to be recorded, Bob?
Sure, that's fine. By the way, I'm just going to hold just 1 second and knock off my phone so I don't get any incoming calls. So hold on, please.
Okay, Bob, feel free to begin your share now.
Okay.
Can we turn on the recording first?
Okay.
Recording in progress.
Okay, my name is Bob. I'm a grateful recovering compulsive overeater. Glad to be with you, men, and thanks, Reggie, for contacting me to qualify tonight. Very briefly, I've been in OA for about 29 and a half years. I'm currently in perfectly abstinence, 11 and a half years. My abstinence I define as physical, emotional, and spiritual, and it'll never be perfect. So, going back to my earliest memories of being a compulsive overeater, and actually that changed, believe it or not, in the last 2 weeks. I'm now back to somewhere between ages 6 and 7, and my mother took me to my grandmother's house in Roanoke, Virginia, and I can remember sugar was my definite my definite drug. Let's put it that way. Do you mention specific foods or not at this meeting?
Yes, you can mention food.
Okay, well, my favorite was the lemon meringue pie with graham cracker crust, and my grandmother just loved to fix the food and then to make homemade ice cream and licking the paddles, and oh boy, those are my earliest memories. And then later on, I remember when I was at home between, say, 8 and 10 years old, of being teased at a schoolyard about being fat, coming home, going to the kitchen, picking up a box of cookies, going up to my room in isolation and eating either half a box or a full box. Those are my earliest memories of my compulsive overeating. So mine went back a long time. And as somebody said to me when I complained, it took me 53 years to get into OA, he said, it only took you 53 years to get in. So those were my early days. And we've used the word, and we know the word binge, because I'm not good enough. Well, we have a program of plagiarism, and I like something that I heard not too long ago for BINGE, because I need God's energy. And I need God's energy, and I'll talk about that as I go along with my program. And I cannot do this disease without my higher power, whom I call God. I had very low self-esteem growing up. I was fearful, and I did not feel good about who I was. So those were my early memories, and I don't know what happened there, but anyway, my earliest memories of that basically was I was shy. I didn't date very much, and I just didn't feel good about who I was. So I definitely had low self-esteem. And food was a sign of comfort for me. And food was also a sign of love in my family. And our main meal, I grew up in a very loving family. I was very fortunate to have a really good relationship with my mother and father, and my brother and sister as well. I can remember my father sat at one end of the table, and I was sitting at one of the 5 seats at the table. And my father at the end of the meal would say, "Wouldn't you like to have a little stopper?" Well, I never said no to that. That was my more food, and that's part of my volume. Food was my volume was definitely a problem in terms of my food and overeating throughout my early days, and I still have to watch my volume of food, although I do not weigh and measure my food at this point in time. So early memories. So with my low self-esteem, I decided, I needed some way to get positive approval from other people, and I still seek that periodically, and so that's still a character issue, defect for me. But the way I did that was through sports, and some of you who know me know I'm a sports addict. I'm 83 years old, and I still play tennis, bocce, not badminton, ping pong, pickleball, you name it. I love it. love to play sports, and that keeps me active. I am very fortunate health-wise in that I do not take any medications, prescription medications, and I am very fortunate to be very active, so I'm very lucky with that. So sports were a way I could get a positive approval. And growing up in my high school, if you looked at my yearbook, many of the girls in the yearbook would talk about, the pitching that I did for high school. So that was the way I got approval, one way I got approval. So anyway, growing up in the food, going into high school, playing sports, basketball, baseball, and other sports, tennis, I continued to, eat a lot in between meals. I never passed a fast food restaurant that I didn't like for many years, beyond the high school time. So I guess when I graduated from high school and to college, I probably weighed about 180 pounds. I currently weigh about 180 pounds right now. I got married and started a new job, and we had 3 children within 5 years, and put a lot of pressure on my wife. And at the end of 1968 to 70, I had a chance my job in the banking business to travel to the Far East and Southeast Asia, and my wife said, "Go do it. It should be fun and good experience." Well, I did that for 2 years. I really enjoyed the traveling out to the Far East and Southeast Asia. But in 1970, when I got back from a trip, my wife was diagnosed with being a bipolar. And for the next 15 years plus, my life was a roller coaster, and I had no clue what I was going to run into when I got home. And for 30 years, from 1970 to 2000, including 8 years in OA, I played the role of the victim of my wife's bipolar disease. I blamed everything, and any problem was because of her disease. And my payoff was I didn't have to take responsibility for myself. And finally, I went to a non-OA meeting, and a man stood up in a large gathering and talked about how he lived his life as a victim, and my higher power put the message to me, "That's you, Bob." And I stood up in front of those 100 people, and my wife was there and said I was being a victim to her bipolar disease. She wasn't real happy I did that, quite frankly, but that was the beginning of starting to take more responsibility for looking at my side of the street, which the steps certainly helped me do that. And when I have 3 fingers pointing, 1 finger pointing at you, I have 3 pointing back at me. And the trigger that I feel is inside me, and I probably see my defect in the other person. And I've learned that in OA and other programs. So that was a huge happening. And then there's the mid-1980s. I remember stepping on the scale in my mother's home and weighing 272 pounds and being scared the hell out of me. About 4 years later, roughly, I would say, I was involved with going to counseling, and I still go to counseling, believe it or not, with my wife, and we're making progress on our marriage, only 61 years. And the counselor said to me, "Bob, I think it's time you started dealing with your eating addiction." And I said, "What?" I didn't want to hear I was an addict, that's for sure. So he sent me to an eating disorder group. I went for about 18 months, one night a week for about 18 months, and I had a panic attack from a job change. And that was the only meeting where a psychiatrist was there, and she said, "You need to get out of work." And so I did. I got out of work. I thought I'd never work again. That was the bottom I hit before I came into OA. I was out of work somewhere between 60 and 90 days, and I came back with a salary cut and did some miscellaneous jobs for a while. And then, but I was really diagnosed with a situational depression. That was the bottom that I hit. When I came into OA, I heard 3 things that stuck with me. Meeting makers make it, take what you like and leave the rest, and keep coming back no matter what. And while I've had short-term relapses, usually no longer than 2 or 3 months, mostly after trips that I've taken, I've kept coming back to meetings. And a major mistake I made for any newcomers on the line is I did not have a sponsor except for the first year for 2 temporary sponsors for 14 years. I look back and say, well, why didn't I have a sponsor? Because I didn't want to be accountable to anybody. And then I got a very experienced sponsor, many of you would know his name, and he worked me through the steps, and I think it was 16 months, and I'm not recommending that for anybody, but that's what it took me to go through the steps. He also told me it's about time you did service above the group level, and I had not done service above the group level, and finally in 2007, the World Service Convention in Philadelphia, I did a workshop, one that was entitled, dealing with sexual or being sexual and I forget the other part of the title, but I never thought they took me for that title. But anyway, since then I've been very active in doing service, and service has helped me. In terms of one of the things that I hated to do, and I still don't love to do, is looking in the mirror. I was talking to my daughter one time about that, and she said, "Dad, did you ever think when you looked in the mirror is what you didn't want to see what was inside you?" Wow. I thought it was my outsides, but I didn't want anybody to know what my insides were doing. And my insides were not a very healthy place. And I learned that, and going through the steps in the program has really helped me to look at my insides. And that was a revelation for me, let's put it that way. The other thing that happened for me, I came into the program as a religious person, and I'm now a spiritual person as a result of working through the 12 steps. I had a belief in God, but a God up in the sky. And I found through working the steps, I found the God inside me, whom I call my higher power. And it's a God who basically, and I'm going to read something briefly from the August 27th of the Voices of Recovery, which really stuck with me. I'm just going to read part of it. Over the years, I've relapsed periodically, never thinking of it as rejection of my higher power, but it was. I was telling my higher power that I had more faith in food than in him. It was easier to drown my fears in food than to trust my higher power to carry me through them. It was easier to believe that God was too busy to care about what I ate than that he grieved over every extra bite that I took. Wow. He had time to grieve over every extra bite that I took. And working the steps and going through the program, I know my higher power, whom I call God, loves me every moment of every day, no matter what I do. And I can ask him for help. And when I do ask for that help, he gives it to me in some ways. In some ways, I don't even realize how that happened. I'd like you to share an image with you in terms of a door. On one side of the door is my higher power, always seeking me. And the other side of the door is me, and the handle is on my side of the door. I need to open that handle and make that connection with my higher power in order to have my higher power help me in the program. And for me, opening that door is being abstinent physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And that connects me with my higher power, who is the only real defense I have against my disease that tells me lies all the time. So that was a spiritual awakening. Another spiritual awakening for me was in 1999, around 1999. I was in a meeting. A woman talked about writing a letter to her higher power, whom she called God, but then she talked about writing back. Well, I've been doing that for over 20 years, and each day in my daily devotions, having writing to my higher power and immediately turning around and writing from my higher power back to me. And that gives me that connection with my higher power inside of me, and really has made a difference in terms of my belief in my higher power and what my higher power can do for me. So those were important parts of my program. Also getting involved with service above the group level, and I've been a World Service delegate at the business conference, and this will be going into my 4th year, and have been active also at the region level and my intergroup level as well. And I really believe that service is not an option, it's a requirement in this program. And I wrote a brief article on that not too long ago. So those are some of the things that, and another thing that I learned in one of my readings, which is a non-OA reading, is my higher power said, celebrate adversity in your life. And I say, what? Celebrate adversity? Why would I want to do that? My higher power says, it'll bring you closer to me. And it may help you help somebody else who goes through the same thing that you're going through. And I can tell you when I came into OA is, why did God do this to me? But today, I know it's why did God do this for me, because it saved my life emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And I'm very grateful for that. I think that I'd like to share with you what I call my 6 A's of the OA program. The first A is acceptance. I had to accept that I had this disease. And the first A is awareness, pardon me. It's not, it's the first word. The first one is awareness. I had to become aware that I was an addict, and then I had to become aware that OA was available to help me. So that was the beginning. And awareness is key in the program in other ways, but I'm using it just in this way for now. The second A is acceptance. Acceptance that I have the disease and that my life was unmanageable. It was a lot easier for me to accept that I had the disease and that my life was unmanageable. I did not want to admit that. And certainly working through the steps, I needed to admit that. The third A is absolutely crucial to me in the 6 A's, and that is the word ask. Ask my higher power before I take the 4th A, which is action. If I do not ask my higher power to help me with the action I should take, it's going to be my ego easing God out that takes the action. And I have my acronym is EGI, easing God in. And abstinence helps me ease God in. Then I have the action that's going to take me one of 2 ways. If I take it without asking my higher power, it's going to head me toward my disease. But when I take that action, which is with my higher power's guidance, it's going to take me toward my recovery, and I need that every day. I also then have the 5th A, which is amnesia. That's because I have a large forgettery, and I keep forgetting that what I need to do. So that's why I have to keep coming back to meetings, stay active in service, have outreach connection with my OA friends, get to meetings, do my devotions in the morning, and I take about 45 minutes to do my devotions, and I do some reading from the Voices of Recovery for Today and several religious books, and then I have a journal that we have in Region 7, which basically goes through and talks about the previous day. I write it in the morning, any resentments, irritability, things like that go on, counting my blessings, praying for other people, and doing my letter to God and God writing back to me. Just briefly overview of that journal. If anybody's interested in that journal, feel free to contact me, and I could send you pages. My phone number is 610-368-2557. I can't put it on the Zoom meeting. That's 610-368-2557. Then the 6th A is abstinence, emotional, spiritual, and physical. And the only way for me to do that is to work through the steps. Going through the steps and going through the inventories that I need to go through to get to that point of being abstinent and then putting the food down. And having a sponsor was absolutely key, and I didn't even realize that for 15 years. And I have a great sponsor, and I contact my sponsor every day by phone and sometimes text messages. And it helps me be accountable and to be honest. And those are really key items that I need to be. I hate the word rigorous honesty. I like to be honest, but not rigorously honest. And yet that's what I need to be in this program. And I am very fortunate to be happily married with counseling involved. I can tell you, and it's helped our relationship even recently. I have 3 daughters and 7 grandchildren. I'm a happy granddad. And I am very fortunate. And every morning, one of the things I do is count my blessings, because if I play the poor me game, I'm in big trouble. And then my higher power cheers for me when I play the blessings, and my lower power, my disease, basically cheers when I get into the poor me game. So I think what I'm going to like to do is to wrap up now and hear the sharing. And I'm going to finish off with a poem that I did at the silent retreat, at OA retreat, and it's called My Higher Power. My God is awesome. He guides me each day. When I open the door, he finds a way to convey his thrill. His will for me is a thrill. Someday he will call me to heaven. Yes, he will. And when he asks me questions about OA, I'll respond that the 12 steps were the way for me to grow up and be a responsible man. Thanks, God, for having OA in my action plan. As I write this poem, I feel a breeze. God's speaking to me, and I'm at ease. It's a gift to be silent and hear his voice. He gives me free will, and it is my choice. To open the door and let him in brings joy to my heart and a big grin. You are here today, and I feel your presence. Being gentle with myself is the essence of being open to listen to your will for me. In the OA world, I'm happy, joyous, and free. Your loving child, Bob B. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.